I was born and raised in a small town on the edge of the mountains, nestled close to a vast forest that stretched for miles. My family always lived on the outskirts of town, near the woods, and I spent a lot of time there growing up. It was a place full of adventure when I was a kid, and my friends and I would always find new paths to explore, pretend we were hunters, or simply wander aimlessly into the thick brush. But as I got older, that innocent love of the forest turned into a wariness I couldn't explain. I always thought there was something unnatural about that place. Something about the way the trees seemed to twist and bend, how the wind would pick up suddenly, carrying with it strange whispers that seemed to be just out of reach. But it was always the little things, the things that didn't make sense, that made me uneasy. I brushed it off for years, chalking it up to my imagination or just the eerie stillness that comes with being out in the middle of nowhere. When I was in my early 20s, I moved back home for a while after finishing school. I had been living in the city for the past few years, and I missed the peace and quiet of the countryside. It felt strange at first, like stepping into a memory that no longer quite fit, but after a few weeks, it began to feel like home again. One evening, as the sun began to set and the temperature dropped, I decided to take a walk into the woods. I wasn't going to venture too deep, just enough to clear my head. I grabbed a flashlight, bundled up in a jacket, and headed toward the edge of the forest. I knew the woods like the back of my hand, but this time, something was different. The air felt heavier, like the trees themselves were pressing in on me, and the path, once so familiar, seemed darker than I remembered. As I walked, I noticed how quiet it was, too quiet. The usual sounds of birds, insects, and rustling leaves were absent. The only noise was the crunch of my boots on the fallen leaves beneath me. I pulled my jacket tighter around me and pushed forward, trying to shake the feeling that I was being watched. The path I usually took meandered deeper into the forest, winding through trees that had grown so tall they blocked out most of the light. The deeper I went, the darker it became, and that's when I saw it, the first sign that something was wrong. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks, but as I drew closer, I could see that something had been moved in the clearing ahead. A pile of branches and old logs had been stacked together in a way that didn't look natural, almost as if someone had placed them deliberately. But who would be out here at this hour? I stopped, my heart racing. Something didn't feel right. I turned to leave, but as I did, I heard something behind me, a soft rustling sound, like footsteps in the leaves. My head snapped around, but there was nothing there. I shook it off as nothing more than a trick of the wind. But the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I couldn't ignore the feeling that I wasn't alone. I began to walk faster, my footsteps growing quicker, trying to outrun whatever it was that was making me feel so uneasy. And that's when I heard it, a whisper, just faintly at first, but growing louder. It was a voice, low and hushed, as if someone was right behind me, whispering in my ear. But when I spun around, there was no one there. I froze, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts. The voice was still there, now coming from all around me, swirling in the air like a cold breeze. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Something was watching me, something with ill intent. In that moment, I didn't care if it was just my imagination. I turned and ran, not even thinking about where I was going, just needing to get out of there. My heart pounded in my chest as I sprinted through the trees, not stopping for anything. The further I ran, the more disorienting the forest became. The trees seemed to shift, their trunks twisting in ways that defied logic. What should have been a straight path had suddenly turned into a maze. My flashlight flickered, casting long, twisted shadows across the forest floor. I could hear the whispering now all around me, the words clearer, though still incomprehensible. My breathing became ragged as I stumbled, nearly tripping over roots and rocks. I had no idea how far I had run, but the dark was closing in quickly. I could feel the cold air pressing down on me, the shadows stretching to engulf me. Suddenly, I heard something in the distance, a scream distant but unmistakable. It wasn't human, though. It was something else, something animal, something primal that echoed through the forest like the cry of a wounded beast. My blood ran cold, and I stopped in my tracks, my eyes scanning the darkness. I didn't know if it was real or just the panic setting in, but I could have sworn I saw something move between the trees. A figure, tall and thin, standing just out of the reach of the light. I couldn't make out any details, but it was there, watching me. That's when I decided I had to get out of there, no matter the cost. I turned and started running again, this time heading in the opposite direction, praying I wasn't running deeper into the forest. The whispering had stopped, but the feeling of being hunted, of being pursued, had only grown stronger. And then, just as suddenly as the fear had taken hold of me, I emerged from the trees. I wasn't sure how, but I found myself back at the edge of the forest, my feet heavy with exhaustion. I looked around, and everything seemed to be normal again. The trees stood still, and the sky above was clear. The sun had long since disappeared, but I could see the distant glow of town lights through the trees. I stumbled back to my car, not looking back once. The strange feeling didn't leave me, though. It lingered in the pit of my stomach, gnawing at me like a memory I couldn't escape. It's been years now, and I haven't been back to the woods since. I can't explain what happened that night, but I know I'll never forget the feeling of being watched, of something lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. And sometimes, just as I'm about to fall asleep, I can hear it again. The whispering voice, as soft and chilling as ever. It's a sound that haunts me, a reminder that there are things out there in the dark that we're not meant to understand. Maybe it was all in my head. Maybe it wasn't. But I'll never be the same.